day to all. Today, we will discuss the 4 forms of repetition under the revised penal code. The recidivism, quasi-recidivism, reiteration and habitual delinquency. This topic explains the different ways an offender may repeat the commission of crimes, which can affect criminal liability and the penalty imposed. So, why do some people return to crime even after being punished? This is called recidivism. In this video, I will explain its meaning, give an example, and discuss ways to reduce it. Recidivism refers to the tendency of a person to commit a crime again after they have already faced punishment, supervision, or intervention for a previous offense. It shows how likely a person is to return to criminal behavior even after going through jail, probation, rehabilitation programs, or any form of correction. In criminal justice, recidivism is used to measure the effectiveness of the system. If many individuals reoffend, it means programs inside prison may not be working, re-entry support may be lacking, or the person's criminogenic needs, such as education, employment, addiction, or environment, were not properly addressed. Recidivism is usually tracked through rearrest, reconviction, or return to prison within a follow-up period, commonly 3 years post-release. It also helps in understanding key concepts like incapacity, deterrence, rehabilitation, and the natural process of desistance. Let's look at an example to understand recidivism clearly. Mark is a 24-year-old who was imprisoned for burglary. While in prison, he joins some programs but struggles with discipline and has very little family support. After serving his sentence, he is released back into the community. At first, Mark tries to live a better life. But he faces several challenges. He cannot find a stable job because of his criminal record. His old friends, who are involved in crime, influence him again. He experiences stress and financial problems. Within 8 months, Mark commits another burglary and gets arrested again. Because he committed a new crime after being punished for the previous one, Mark is considered to have recidivated. This example shows that recidivism does not only happen because a person wants to reoffend. Sometimes lack of support, poverty, negative environment, or weak rehabilitation pushes them back into crime. How to minimize recidivism? Recidivism can be reduced through proper support and intervention. Rehabilitation programs such as education, job training, counseling, and addiction treatment help change behavior. After release, re-entry support like employment, housing, and mental health services helps individuals start a stable life. A supportive community and family environment also prevents a return to crime. Lastly, fair probation or parole supervision and addressing personal risk factors like unemployment, addiction, and negative peers help individuals gradually stop offending. And the next one is quasi-recidivism. The law becomes stricter when a convicted offender commits another crime. This situation is known as quasi-recidivism. Quasi-recidivism. Quasi-recidivism exists when a person, after being convicted by final judgment, commits another felony before serving the sentence or while serving the sentence for the first crime. Under Article 160 of the Revised Penal Code, it is a special aggravating circumstance, and the penalty for the second offense is imposed in its maximum period, regardless of mitigating circumstances. Let's look at an example to understand quasi-recidivism clearly. Juan was finally convicted of theft and was already serving his sentence in prison. While incarcerated, he committed homicide by killing another inmate. Juan is considered a quasi-recidivist, and the penalty for homicide shall be imposed in its maximum period. How to minimize, avoid its application. Quasi-recidivism cannot be offset by mitigating circumstances once it applies. However, it will not exist if the first conviction is not yet final. The second offense is not a felony. The first sentence has already been fully served. There is no proof that the offender was serving sentence at the time the second crime was committed. Next is reiteration. In criminal law, some offenders do not stop committing crimes even after they have already been punished. Instead of changing their ways, they repeat unlawful acts and continue to violate the law. This repeated disregard for legal punishment shows a failure to reform and respect the justice system. One concept that explains this behavior is called reiteration. Reiteration is a situation where a person commits another crime after already being convicted and punished for a previous offense. It shows a habitual tendency to commit crimes and a lack of reform, even after experiencing punishment such as imprisonment, fine, or probation. In criminal law, reiteration is considered an aggravating circumstance because the offender did not learn from the first punishment and continued to violate the law. Let's look at an example to understand reiteration clearly. A person was convicted and jailed for the crime of theft. After serving the full sentence and being released from prison, the person was given another chance to live lawfully in society. However, instead of changing behavior, the same person committed theft again. This situation is considered reiteration because the offender repeated the same criminal act despite having already been punished by law. How to minimize reiteration. 1. Effective rehabilitation. Provide counseling, education, and skills training to offenders. 2. Stronger deterrence. Impose appropriate penalties that discourage repeat offenses. 3. Close monitoring after release. Probation, parole supervision, and regular check-ins. 4. Employment and livelihood support. Help former offenders find legal jobs to avoid returning to crime. 5. Moral and values formation. Programs that promote responsibility, discipline, and respect for the law. Next is habitual delinquency. In criminal law, there are offenders who repeatedly commit crimes over time, even after several convictions. Their continuous involvement in unlawful acts shows a pattern of behavior rather than a single mistake. This repeated criminal conduct is known as habitual delinquency. Habitual delinquency refers to a situation where a person is found guilty of certain crimes repeatedly, within a specific period, and has been previously convicted 2 or more times for the same or similar offenses. Because of this repeated behavior, the law imposes additional penalties on the offender. Let's look at an example to understand habitual delinquency clearly. A person was convicted of theft and served the sentence. Within a few years, the same person was again convicted of theft. After another release, the person committed theft once more. This person is considered a habitual delinquent because the crime was repeatedly committed after multiple convictions. How to minimize habitual delinquency. 1. Intensive rehabilitation programs focus on behavior change, therapy, and skills training. 2. Strict monitoring and supervision, strong probation and parole systems. 3. Employment and livelihood assistance providing legal income opportunities. 4. Education and values formation, moral and character development programs. 5. Community and family support systems to help prevent reoffending. And that's all for today. Thank you for listening and watching.